Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you're not alone. This is your one stop shop for mastering your finances throughout the entire divorce process. In today's episode, we're talking with Morgan Anderson from Golden Lion Tax Solutions. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the financial side of divorce, especially related to tax issues, don't be. Morgan's here to help us break it down step by step so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clear picture of your financial situation. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's get you financially empowered. Welcome, Morgan.
Hey, thanks so much, Jamie. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for carving out some time to chat with us. This is a conversation that we have a lot with our clients, especially going through divorce. A lot of people focus on things like child support and alimony and dividing up assets and so on, and they completely overlook the tax issues that are embedded in this process. I'm sure you've seen that a bunch yourself. So can you share your journey with us and how you've segued or specialized, so to speak, in tax solutions, particularly as it relates to folks that are going through a divorce?
I've been doing this work focused only on solving tax debt issues for almost 25 years. So it's kind of an interesting little corner of the world, the financial world and the tax world in and of itself. So my specialty is being a problem solver when there's a tax debt situation. And I can't tell you how many clients have come to me and said, oh, well, I went through a divorce, we had tax debt, but it says right here in the divorce decree that my ex is supposed to take responsibility for dealing with the debt. Why are the tax agencies coming to me? He or she is supposed to be paying this. And you have to remember that a marital union and a divorce thereafter is a civil matter, right? When you're dealing with the federal government, they say, oh, that's a civil affair. We're not worried. That's more between you and your ex. You both sign the tax returns, so you're both financially responsible for this debt that came from it. So,
Yeah, no, and that's the thing that sneaks up on people a lot, right?
It does. It does. And unfortunately, even though there's a divorce decree there, that does not absolve you from having to answer to the federal government. States are a little different. We can use that a little better at the state level. But when it comes to an IRS debt, that's something that unfortunately you have to deal with. And it's better to be proactive, and have it be part of the divorce negotiations. Make a plan for addressing the tax debt before you sign on the dotted line.
Absolutely. Now, isn't there something? And we a lot of the folks that we work with, unfortunately, are not always involved in the financial aspects of their lives before the divorce, right? Usually
Mhm.
there's that maybe a stay-at-home mom who is focused on taking care of the kids and getting them off to school and doctor's appointments and activities and that type of thing. And then, maybe the husband stays at home. He's off working, I'm sorry, but he's the financial person, right? The chief financial officer of the house.
Mhm.
And he handles the tax returns and so on and so forth. Are there any protections in place? Is the innocent spouse rule that's involved? Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that would be involved? Because a lot of people that we work with are like, hey, we haven't filed our taxes in 2 years or whatever it is, and I thought we had. Now what?
Right. No, and that's a great program that people hear about, but it doesn't quite mean what you want it to mean. So, innocent spouse, that program really comes into place when one of the husband or wife makes an error on the tax return associated with,
Hmm.
like, they have a business, okay, and they took a position on the tax return and it created a tax consequence that both parties then are responsible for. One can say, hey, I know I signed the tax return, but I didn't know that her business misrepresented itself financially on the tax return. Does that make sense? So it's more like It doesn't absolve you from signing the tax return and having obligation for any tax consequence, but more it's for a position that your partner took that you wouldn't have had any way of knowing was going on. Does
Okay.
that
That
does that
that
break it
certainly that
down a little
helps. Yeah,
better?
that it absolutely does. And that's definitely good to know because we do have some, some existing clients and some clients we've had in the past where, the one spouse or the other has a business, maybe they're potentially hiding money, maybe they're not being truthful on the returns and so on. It's good to know that clause, so to speak, or that break in case of emergency option is there. But I thank you for clarifying. I wasn't 100% sure on how that all worked.
Yeah, and everybody gets really excited about it, but I wasn't handling the finances. Oh, but you had an obligation, you had a responsibility to a degree. And that's where the difference is between how innocent spouse sounds versus what it actually means. So,
Awesome, awesome. So could you explain maybe some effective strategies that you've seen or you impart with some of the clients that you work with to minimize the tax burdens that they do have as they're going through the divorce?
sure. Well, first things first, be proactive. Make it part of the negotiation that you handle the tax debt with assets from the marital financial holding before you go your separate ways. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but usually real estate is a big one. If you're going to sell the marital home and split the proceeds, first things first, make sure any debt that you are jointly responsible for gets addressed that way, whether it be credit cards or tax debt. Make sure that it is negotiated through the divorce negotiations to have that tended to. Always take into account tax consequences of any moves that you make. Right now, we're doing this divorce mediation testimony where we take all those puzzle pieces and put them together and make a recommendation to both sides to let them know, hey, this is the way the IRS will view your financial condition. And this is a recommendation of how you handle it before you part ways. And here are the tax consequences that you need to take into account, whether it's capital gains that you're going to end up having a consequence with or anything else. So it's a pretty interesting proactive move to make, but it's something that we strongly urge you to do.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I have not seen any. We work with a lot of people that are tax professionals like yourself, and we have yet to see
Yeah.
that. So that is huge.
Yeah, it makes, going through a divorce is such a stressful thing. It really is. And to be able to walk out the backside of it, knowing that anything that could haunt you as much as reasonably possible, you get handled before you part ways. It's just going to make the life that you're moving into thereafter a little bit better because you won't have those worries hanging out there.
Absolutely. So relating to the tax returns, that final
Yeah.
year, can you kind of walk through what that looks like? The final, I know, as so long as correct me if I'm wrong here, but so long as they file as whatever status they have as of December 31st in that year is how they're going to file, correct?
Well, but you also want to look at maybe you filed married filing separately for that last year. It
Mhm.
depends on what you look like on paper, how you're going to maximize your refund. There's different strategies, and it really is dependent on the couple and then the separate parties, the way they look financially.
Okay. Basically, so it goes back to being proactive, right? Just reviewing how things were before,
Correct.
is there a new strategy this year we should employ, or do we want to just, if the divorce is finalized by December 31st, they do have to file as either head of household, right, or as a single person, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Any tips and tricks around that? Anything? Because I think the head of household component there might trip some people up sometimes.
It does. And this is where I would say work with your CPA, or if you need a CPA or somebody that you can trust to walk through everything that happened, you want somebody to sit down and think of them. This sounds bad, but think of them as a priest, like confess everything, make sure they know all components of what you look like financially, because they will be able to then say, okay, the best position for you to take on your tax return is this, and here's why. You want to minimize the tax, maximize your refund every way that you legally can. And everybody's finances are so unique to every decision that they've made, every source of income they receive, every safety net they have in place. So that's why I say think of your CPA, your accountant as your priest, and let them know everything, because then they can guide you the best way possible. It's unfortunately just not one of those everybody fits in category A, B, or C. There's an infinite number of options just depending on your financial condition.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. Now, what about kids? Are there any strategies revolving around kids? We as we're calculating child support and alimony and things of that nature, a lot, especially specifically with child support, a lot that's factored in there is things like timeshare with the parent. Can we
Mhm.
talk a little bit about some of those? I am not a tax expert by any stretch. I know enough to get by. I know
Yeah.
enough to be able to do the work that I do, but all the IRS codes and all the tax credits and things of that nature can be a little confusing. And if you're not living in this world, especially a lot of people that are listening to us do not live in our world, so
Right.
it can get a little muddy. So is there anything there's maybe Cliff Notes version of some of the credits and things of that nature that they're going to want to make sure that they pay attention to as they're starting to finalize the divorce?
It's a great question, but again, there's an infinite number of things to consider, right? And it really just depends on your income level, how
Mm-hmm.
much time you have the kids, what kind of alimony, child support is being considered, what type of schooling, what school age the kids are in. If they're in daycare, you can claim it. If they're in public school, you can't unless it's daycare. Or if they're in private school, you can't claim that. You can claim the before and after school care. There's 1,000 different options there. Again, getting with your accountant. And I would say be proactive with it as you're going into the divorce negotiations. Keep your accountant on speed dial. Hey, here's what one side wants to do. Here's what I'm thinking. What would be the tax consequence of any of this coming about? Like I said, we offer that service from a tax debt perspective, but for tax planning purposes, you really want to get with your CPA about it.
Absolutely. I just left the conference where we spent 90 minutes on some of the updates on some of the IRS codes and things of that nature and some different tax strategies you can use with divorce. And
Yeah.
my head was spinning because there's so much. And I don't even know how many millions of pages of tax code there is out there, but it's way too much. We've made it very, very complicated. So it's
Yes, we have.
nice to have people like you on the front lines helping us on our side navigate it, because we could not do it without you. That's for sure. So we've talked a little bit about the common tax implications. We've talked about you brought up you had answered a couple of questions that I already had earlier on about being proactive and really just trying to make sure that you're not walking away from the divorce and then something comes and bites you 5 years later. Do you have any case studies or maybe clients that you've worked with that are like the people that are in our audience that you can share with us of some of the things that they may have faced before they met you, and then once your work with them was over, if they were in a much better spot? Is there any particular case studies that you can share with us?
How many hours do we have?
Yeah,
Now, and one thing that I want everybody to really, if you have a tax debt situation, take this to heart. There are over 11 million taxpayers across the US, just individual taxpayers that owe past due taxes. So one of my first things I always want people to hear from me, if you walk away from this here listening to this podcast with one message, it is that there is always a solution. Don't ignore it. Always be proactive with it, okay? I know when you get an envelope and it says IRS in the upper left-hand corner, you probably shake a little. It's understandable, but millions of people are receiving similar notices. So I want you to just remember that and that there is always a solution. You just have to take the steps to start addressing it. Now, what I would say too is with a divorcing couple, I had this wonderful couple and they were in the middle of divorce when they came to me. And they had past due tax returns that they hadn't even filed yet. And it was for 5 years, the
Mhm.
prior 5 years, and then they were in the current year. And they said, well, we're getting divorced. And they were pretty nasty with each other on the phone, but they were able to work together enough that we got the tax returns done. They ended up owing about 85,000 in past due income tax for those 5 years. And we were able to speak with their attorneys on both sides and walk through, hey, look, we have to address this through the divorce negotiations. We have to carve out the money to address this because if not, they're both going to be on the hook. They were both having to buy their own homes. They had a little bit of equity in the home that they were selling. And they both, neither one of them knew what was going to happen to them financially afterwards. And this is where working between our office, their accountants, they each had their own. So you get a lot of hands kind of tossing into the pot, well, here's something to think about and here's something to think about. But we were able to walk them through it to where everything was handled before the divorce was finalized. They both went on their own separate ways. They didn't have anything hanging from before the divorce that they had to carry on to their new life. We got it handled between the equity in the home. They each had some 401k. We prepped them for the tax consequence through their accountants. They both tossed into addressing the debt before the divorce was finalized, and they both were thrilled at the end because it just wasn't a great relationship. It happens from time to time, but they were able to move on and just be free of the debt. It wasn't a worry. They got to move on and live their lives, and it was really good outcome. It was the best outcome that you could hope for given the circumstances. So
It's never a good thing to have to owe $85,000 to the IRS, but if you can work it
yeah.
out and be very strategic about it and not cause any additional tax consequences of it, that's certainly the way to go. And
Yeah.
there's definitely something to be said about starting your newfound single life with a clean slate. I'm sure
Yeah.
that was something that they're dying to make happen, especially if it was amicable and they were just wanted to part ways and move on.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's never a situation that any of us ever want to have to go through, but if you have to go through it, boy, you really want to be proactive and just look out for yourself for where you're heading, right? Like today feels very different than how you're going to feel in 6 months. And you want to get to that 6 month mark after the divorce of free and clear and heading in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, this has been amazing. I mean, in a very short amount of time, you've just imparted so much information and knowledge
Yeah.
to our listeners. I'm very, very appreciative of it. Any last parting words, any tips and tricks, or anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure we highlight for our conversation today?
Just being proactive. I know it's hard. It is so hard, especially when you've got a divorce sitting there on the horizon, right? Or something that you're going through right now. I know it's so hard to muster up that strength, but you're going to be so much better for it in 2 or 3 months. So just open the notices you get from the IRS of the state and make sure you bring it up and say, this has to be handled before we're done.
Yeah, I was the lucky recipient of an IRS notice one time during COVID, and it took them 18
Ugh,
months to get back to me. Hopefully it's much faster process these days. But we were proactive. We sent them the information they needed. It
yep.
was over before we knew it, and we're all moving on. So I can appreciate what you're saying there. So Morgan, how do our listeners find you so they can get the help they need in this area?
GoldenLionTaxSolutions.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, on X. I always feel bad saying X. I keep wanting to say Twitter because X just sounds so goofy. But yeah, look us up online. Go to our website. My direct phone number is on there. And a lot of times people will call me and say, oh my gosh, I'm so worried. And it's a situation that they can handle directly without even having to pay somebody to get involved. We are free with that information as well. If you have a tax debt, call me. We'll talk about it. If it makes sense for us to get involved, we will. But if it's something that you can easily handle, we're going to tell you, don't pay somebody to do it. Here's how you handle it, and we'll give you the points. So.
Oh, love it. Love it. And there's nothing worse than, seeing, $99 consultations and things like that with some of these tax people and attorneys as well, that people are charging for these consultations. And we don't do that either. We offer free consultations just to make sure we can triage someone who needs the help and get them the right place. So I'm super appreciative of it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to put all the links and all your social stuff, your X links in there. In this with this audience, X comes up a lot. This is audiences where the X word comes up a lot. So we'll put all of in the show notes with links to everything. Listeners, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need the help, especially related to tax debt. I mean, that's not something you want to carry on into your new life. So hopefully this was helpful for our listeners. Again, links are going to be up. If you need to get in touch with us at Allegiant Divorce Solutions, you can click on our link. We have a free consultation as well that we'll provide to anybody that needs help on the financial planning side of things. I can put you in touch with Morgan if I think she's going to be of some help to you, but don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. We are here to help. We both offer free consultations if you're interested in chatting. But until next time, we'll chat again soon.